let's get kick-started, right? But first, before we jump into the topic of today, which is of course payment factory, how to implement it, etc. Maybe a short introduction is always handy. And I gave it to my colleagues of Deloitte first. So maybe Donato, if you can start, that would be great.
Sure. So Donato Semeraro, working at Deloitte Treasury Services in Belgium. After more than 10 years in corporates and banks, I decided to jump into the consultancy firm. So it's almost 12 years now. And my main focus, as you can imagine, it's payment factory, bank connectivity, and payments.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gabriele Calabro. So I work with Donato at Treasury Advisory Services of Deloitte, Belgium. I have over 5 years experience in finance sector, working mainly as a project manager and implement in the Treasury process, in Treasury project for implementing payment factory.
Super cool. Maybe less relevant, but maybe for the audience interesting, me as well, right? I work for TIS. I'm the TIS guy. I'm responsible for two teams, the product team, but also the professional services team, which is, again, two teams, the support organization, and also all the onboarding and project managers that take our clients forward. But like I said, not relevant. The topic of today is a payment factory, so let's focus on that one. And of course, I know that lots of people read the paper that you launched a few weeks back, but also I think it's very interesting to learn what does a payment factory actually entails, right? So can you explain it to me?
Yeah, sure. So maybe first a few words about what is a payment factory actually. It's a central hub for inflows and outflows. So the purpose of a payment factory is to gather all your payments towards the bank and all the messages coming from the banks. It's most of the time linked to an in-house bank or a central treasury center, or called shared service center. And the nice feature about a payment factory is a setup. The setup is centralized, so you can do the setup of the bank connectivity, of the format enrichment, etc. Everything in one single system, which is the core business of a payment factory. It can also include other area like transaction reporting, reconciliation, netting. So it's I would say high-level description of a payment factory. So then to answer maybe to your question, Walter, to decide. So what the payment factory entails, it's you need a clear vision. So you need to think not only on the short term, but also on the mid to long term, because you will have to invest a lot of money and time in a big solution that will improve your daily job. That's of course the purpose. So again, you need to think also about the right resource. This will you need to secure the right resource internally, because again, this is a big project that needs to be aligned internally. So basically, clear vision, budget, and resource, and of course the timing.
Okay, all right, very clear. Well, I immediately have a question on top of that. You mentioned in-house bank. How crucial is an in-house bank? Because I know that lots of clients don't really have the setup of an in-house bank. You mentioned it is payment generation, including then feedback from banks, etc. How do you see this? Is this crucial? What's the benefit from the in-house bank in this full picture?
I mean, this is part of the payment factory. It's part of this whole picture. So we have clients having payment factory without in-house bank. But having an in-house bank, you know, all the cash flow needs to be built based on that. All the reconciliation, that's something that is done manually when you don't have a tool that is giving you the possibility to do this automatically. So that's the payment factory. It's kind of add-on for the in-house bank. But we never see an in-house bank structure without payment factory. I mean, it
goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, you mentioned one thing, of course, and that's efficiency, right? Which is reconciliation. You mentioned it, but I assume that there are other benefits to a payment factory.
Of course.
Which are the benefits?
Yeah. So yes.
Yeah.
So indeed, sorry. Indeed, there are many benefits in the implementation of a payment factory. Some of the most important that we can think of are, just to start from the one you said, the efficiency. Obviously, with the payment factory, you have a great rate of automation in your payment process, and this will allow you to reduce manual errors and to allows your employees to focus on more strategic activities. But some of other benefits could be indeed cost saving, because obviously by streamlining and optimizing your payment process, you will have the opportunity to lower your IT cost, for instance, because you can replace several tools with one, which is indeed the payment factory. You can lower bank fees, because most of the times the implementation of a payment factory comes hand in hand with the optimization of the number of banks that you have. So if you are able to reduce the bank that you work with, then you will lower also the fees related to them. Maybe another benefit that I can think of is also risk mitigation, because a payment factory can improve the control and the visibility of your payment process and of your financial transactions in general. This means that with an improved control, you can have indeed a standardized process. And the standardized process means that you have also real-time monitoring over the payments that you have, and you can reduce, thanks to this, you can reduce fraud, and you can increase your compliance with your compliance and reduce the compliance issues that you might have. Maybe last but not least, another benefit that you might have is the centralization of payment within your hub or headquarter. This will obviously increase the reporting, the quality of the reporting that you have. It will in turn improve your insight within the cash flow and the accuracy of your cash forecast. Therefore, it will help the top management to have to make more informed decision.
Right, very clear. Well, I think you mentioned a few items which are very interesting, and then because it's also a few of the items are the considerations, right? Key considerations why you should go for a payment factory, but we will come to that later, hopefully. And one of the prerequisites, for example, you mentioned a bank landscape optimization. I'm also very curious on how crucial that is to get started with a payment factory. Can you give some insights on that?
Yes, so usually, obviously, we are talking about multinational landscape, so you cannot, the benefits of implementing a payment factory are most seen when you operate with many banks in many different countries, because indeed you will have then is there where you have the most problems with the visibility of your payment flows, of who approves what, and therefore it's hard to give a precise number of how many banks you should operate with or in how many countries you should be. But obviously it will not do it if you have 2 banks or 3. It's anyway something that you have to try to do when you have a strong decentralized payment process, and therefore a payment factory will have you will give you the opportunity to have more visibility over approvers and so on.
So, Walter, if I may, just to add something, basically we can consider when you have a complex and decentralized payment process, you should think about the payment factory. When you have multiple business units doing their own job, so typically the guy who is sending payments through e-banking in his location, that's something we see usually from the clients. Of course, as Gabriele mentioned, with two banks, it doesn't make sense to build to invest in big payment factory. So multiple high number of banks and different formats, of course. And two maybe last things. The cash visibility, of course, clients without cash visibility due to the COVID, that was one of the main requests from clients. I need to have my visibility quicker because I don't know what's going on in this country because of the COVID. I cannot go there. And another that we had in the past also sometimes clients coming to us because they had a bad audit, so the system was considered too old and too unsecure. So that was the momentum to invest in a strong tool and then one of the top system that the market can offer. So that's basically not an exhaustive list, of course, but that's based on our experience. Yes.
That's very interesting, right? Because initially when we started the explanation on a payment factory, you see that it gets broader, right? It's not only sending out the payments, but also the requirement of a cash visibility is part of the full picture to get it in scope. All right. So I think, well, if you look at who considers implementing a payment factory, I assume, and what I hear, we're looking at larger enterprises, right? We're looking at multiple or multi-bank connections that need to be established with, and am I right to say that it also is more a complex structure, or you don't link the two together?
Most of the time it's linked. So you would be, I mean, probably you know also like us, but you would be surprised to see big company using still Excel and manual e-banking to execute payments in a small room with 6 to 8 different connectivity. They need to go to that room to put the card, to put the PIN. So every company has its own strength and weakness on that side. But indeed, usually it's linked to the complexity.
Okay. And if you talk about complexity, is it then also ERP related or like IT setup, or is it business complexity as well?
Both, actually, both, because the IT part, it's also something usually companies are reluctant to invest in payment. One of the reasons of not investing in payment factories, that's exactly this. So you have plenty of ERPs, plenty of IT system, IT maintenance all around the world, and you don't want to invest millions, or you are trying to push back because it will be so complex that you need to wait the right moment. So very big issue on cash visibility, a merger and acquisition, or change in the management. That's something that we often see. Yes.
Okay, and then linked to that, just a question on top of my head. If you mention IT landscape, well, we know from experience as well that most of our clients have multiple ERPs. So I'm very curious if you investigate the options of a payment factory, and we know that lots of ERPs now are in upgrading. So our clientele is in upgrading. Do you see that as an advantage to start with a payment factory? So for example, you go from an SAP ECC to an S4, right? You're in a migration, which takes years for some cases. Is that a blocker? Do you want to wait? Or how do you see this?
Usually, we take this as an opportunity because it's a big, again, it depends on the situation, but having a big investment in changing your ERP and 2 years later investing in payment factory doesn't make sense. So it's better to do, or at least to prepare to have the payment factory later. When you need to have a clear vision, like I said at the beginning, because if you invest a lot in changing, upgrading your ERP, and 2 years later you decide to invest in a payment factory, when you will have to update again the file that are coming from the ERP, doesn't make sense. You will lose money and for I would say nothing. So if possible, of course, there are a lot of constraints to trying to do everything in the same project. Of course, it's not always easy.
Yeah, and that brings me, of course, to then the next step. Like, I guess you guys have a defined approach, right? How do you approach if a client asks you, hey, we're interested in a payment factory, we are in a migration, I don't know what the whole ins and outs. Do you have a defined approach? How do you tackle this?
Well, indeed, there is a defined approach for this, but overall is an approach that needs to be kept also in a simple and flexible way, because the project and the approach needs to be changed always depending on the complexity of the client. But overall, it's possible to define 4 steps in the approach of implementing a payment factory. The first one, it regards what we said indeed, to have a really treasury assessment and to clearly define the objective and the scopes that you want to achieve with the implementation. So during this phase, it's extremely important to have a comprehensive understanding of your current process, because this during this phase you need to identify the requirements that you want to achieve, that you want to have, the weaknesses present in your current process, and then there is the second part where you will, once you have a clear view of what you have at the moment, then you are ready to go and design what you want to have. So based on the industry best practice, then you can indeed design it to be model where you want to, so which is basically where you want to go and how you want to reach that. So what is the most efficient way to get there? And this is already the second phase. And once you have designed, so now you have a clear view of what you have at the moment and where you want to go, then it's time to go to the market and select the right payment factory solution. This is also a very crucial step within the process, because here you need to prepare your request for proposal, you need to contact the vendors, evaluate their response, you need to also evaluate SLAs, prices. It takes also quite some time. At the end of these steps, you will have, or at the end of this third step, then you will have indeed a contract already signed with one of the vendors, and there is when your implementation can start. So during it is the last step, indeed, the implementation part, where you will have to indeed define your pilot countries. You need to manage the connectivity setup internal and externally, so with banks and with the other system, like just you said, like ERPs, TMS, and so on. Then you need to also manage all the data migration to populate the payment factory. You need to, once this is done, then you will start the testing phase. So you need to test a real case scenario to make sure that you can operate in a smooth way. And finally, you have then a post-implementation support. And last but not least, very important, is the documentation and the training, because you have to document everything that is done during the implementation approach and during the whole project, and make sure that your employees have good training and they are like supportive in the implementation of this payment factory.
Yeah. One question that I have is, so when you design, right, the scope of your project and you go to the vendor, is you have those optimization steps, right? We talked about it before, where you have looking at your bank landscape, maybe workflows as well, right? Optimizing workflows where they are designed in the old platform, like you mentioned, like sometimes it's old. Is that, where do you see that? Is that something where you guys really deep dive into the solution, or you need to also know, of course, the vendor solution in this case, or how is that operating?
It's a very good question indeed. For instance, I can think of a project we did with Donato. So in this, it was about the signing also of the payment. So sometimes you have cases where the client want to have a signature into it needs to have a signature. Sometimes the client already have a signature system in another a signature in place in another system. So in this case, you obviously need to know if which provider can offer what, and there. So this is part. So as we said, for instance, this part at the beginning when you need to know what is your current process, and then there you have to define your requirements, and there you will indeed define with the client whether they expect the payment factory to have this this functionality. That's indeed because obviously it comes with a price. Sometimes you can have an even more expensive provider that offer more benefits and vice versa. So yes, we need to know and understand the payment factory providers and to know them, or at least when you write the request for proposal, then you see there whether their answer is yes, we can do this or not.
Yeah, indeed, and to set expectations, because every client, I assume, that goes into a payment factory solution has a set of expectations, right? It's also your starting point, right? Where are we? What do we have? Where do we want to grow? If you then look at a partnership, and it's not to promote anything, right? But if you then look at a partnership, it is added value, even if you are non-favorable, right? Which you have to be, right? You have to be in the middle, that you know the solutions on the market, what they're capable of, even high level. It doesn't matter how deep you are, but that you know, for example, let's take the example of the workflow, that you know that this exists, right? That there are parties that offer this and that can bring it forward, because it helps in the design phase already. Like, hey, this is crucial for you guys. This is where you need to head, or maybe scrape off some of them to get through the right set of vendors. All right, thanks. Of course, we talked about it now, right? You have your 4 stages. They are there for a reason, and that's to avoid, like you mentioned, avoid risk. It's not only from a risk perspective of a payment factory, but also risk in implementing the payment factory. So apart from this, I'm very curious to learn, like, okay, what are typical complexities? We talked about workflow, we talked about a large set of banks, we talked about ERP. Are there any other or major considerations or complexities that you see in such a project?
So, of course, we based on our experience, we saw a lot of nice situation. So again, the scoping is very key. And just to add something, when we do the scoping, or when the client needs to do this scoping, he needs really to look into the nitty-gritty of their process. And sometimes it's challenging to gather all the information, because you have the subsidiary in the US that forgot to tell you, yeah, look, I still have logbox there. Yeah, in the middle of the project, suddenly, yeah, but yeah, I forgot that. So sometimes it's not easy to gather all the information. So reason why the scope, it's really key. We had clients having additional feature needed during the project, and then saying that the vendor was not the good one. But I mean, if you don't have a clear scope, how can the vendor know that you need this feature? So that's the reason why the scope is very key. Of course, you said for the vendor selection, yes, we know more or less the capability that needs to be in a payment factory. So we need to understand what the client needs. In case, because it's, let's be honest, we do selection sometimes on product that we know in theory. So we can go in the detail of the business requirement line by line to assess with the client what is important for you. Is this payment feature? Is the validation? Is the security? Is the price? Even though the price, maybe later we'll discuss that. So we work together with the client to do a kind of assessment, a weight on their need and what they want to be achieved. And again, you need, what's very important, it's also to engage with the bank, because usually management in all the projects, we are saying, yeah, the product is there, just a matter of testing. Look with the bank, yeah, but we all know that the banks, some of the banks have internal constraints. They cannot give you resource like this in one day. They need to open the test environment. It can take 1, 2, 3 months, while another doing the same, it can take 1 week. And sometimes, you know, yeah, it's a SEPA payment, so it will work. Not always. So that's and then link to that the right resource. So you need internally the right resource, because the guys are working on a daily job. So if you don't have a specific project management for that project, because most of the company don't have a project management team, it's not something obvious. You need to ask people to do on top of. So that's something to be careful. And like you said, with the ERPs, let's imagine if you have 15 local ERPs, that you need 15 IT guys to be secure. That's challenging.
All right. I took one note, right, which is maybe also interesting, also for me, is if you look at your setup, the way you approach it. Do I understand it correctly that you actually, if you have like a global huge enterprise, that you look like through all the deviations and try to define a global template? Is that a correct assumption? Global approach, global template, and then take the key considerations and then ask the questions like, okay, how critical is this in your process? Can we fit this on the global template? Is that a correct assumption or?
Exactly. We did also in the past, for example, for a company that used to work with an entity in the US. I've been there for 3 days just to see how they did their job, because in Belgium, where the headquarters was, I didn't know what they did on a daily basis. So I had to go there for 3 days to understand what was the process. And they enter manually the payment. They went to the bank with the checks, etc. So we need to have a global vision to give the right advice, and then for the client to select the right tool with the right feature. Because most of the time, some companies say, yeah, I have one empty 101 per month, so put thin messages. That's maybe not the right business decision, because yeah, let's see if we can do something on your process. So yeah, global view is key also. Right.
Okay. Interesting. Well, you opened the floor to maybe a very important question, and I know it's important for all projects, right? Is that you mentioned when I went on for a 3-day workshop to learn about the processes. I think this opens the box as well. Like if you look at timeframes, right? If you look at the total picture of such an implementation, and maybe phased, right? I leave it to you guys. What is realistic? And for me, always very important. I don't want to overshoot things. So a few questions, like if you look at timeframes, what is realistic? And then if you look at a realistic expectation, and what is the duration, right? It depends on resources, but maybe you can shed some light on this one.
So indeed, this is a very important part of the of the discussion, because obviously if we retake the 4 steps that we mentioned before, so I would say that for the first 2 steps you will need between 1 and 2 months. So depending on the complexity of the business, you will need between 1 and 2 months to assess what is your current process, what are the weaknesses, what are the improvements that you want to do, and to define also the to-be process where you want to go. Then if we talk about, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Because I have a feeling that you will jump to the second point, right? So this is as-is process. Who do you need for that as-is process? Is it business? Is it also IT involvement? Who do you need in that?
Yes, of course. So for the process, you need all the stakeholders, like the business part, because so obviously the Treasury department, so representative SMEs of that Treasury department, because you need to understand what do they do and how they do it on daily basis. Then you will probably need also IT parts to understand also which technology do they use, what is the IT structure and landscapes that they have. So these are indeed the most important. Then you will maybe at this stage you will still not need the banks as a representative, but you will still anyhow need a number to know how many banks, how many bank accounts, what is the volume of payments. So all this is something that you will need to know. And then, as I was saying, in the second, in the third step, we need to select a vendor. Then in that part, I would say it can take between 2 and 4 months. And this, let's say, I give this time frame because here again, then it will depend. You're now taking external parts, so it will depend on how fast a vendor responds. It will depend. There is usually always a ping pong of emails with with question on qualification of the price of SLAs. So this can take some time as well. Then you have to organize the demos with the vendors, so it takes some time as well. And finally, if we go into the implementation part,
can I stop you again? Sorry, Gabriel, but I have a question because you mentioned initially with the phase 1, you said like, it's not certain if we really already need the banks. I guess when you hit your vendor, or maybe it's part of your RFP as well, right? To identify which banks, options, connections, link with the vendor. I think then it gets more crucial, right?
Yes, indeed. So in that part, yes.
No, just a question. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. No, don't worry. And then indeed, in the last part, which is the implementation part, then you will need between 6 and 12 months to do that, because during that part, indeed, you will have to define your pilot countries, you will have to manage the onboarding of the banks. So you will have to set up the connectivities with your internal systems, external. You will also have to do the testing to migrate all the data into the system, and therefore to document, to train the people. So it takes also there quite some time.
Yeah. And then a question related to this one, as being vendor myself, so then the vendor is engaged, right? That means that also the project team from the vendor will be there, they do the setup. Just a question on you guys. So you also mentioned phase number 4, documentation. Does that mean that you are next to the client to support them and bringing it forward, and also the documentation part to make sure that you wrap it up in a clean way, or is that correct?
Sure. I mean, I always like to stress the fact that the project does not end with a go live. So after that point, there is always a hypercare phase. There is also a documentation training. People come to you with questions, and you have to be there. You need to be flexible for them to explain, because it's something that is crucial that they understand and embrace the change, because otherwise this project can fail because people don't like the new tool, they don't want to use it. So it's really like it's really crucial.
And also
it's a topic. Sorry, Donato. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Just to add, we do full implementation, but we also support clients on the different phases. We had clients calling us only for the testing because they thought, yeah, we can do everything alone. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you are, they were not able to cope with that. We are also sometimes called only for the scoping and the build, and then they have the right resource, and sometimes only to help the vendor to do the setup and the back onboarding. So it might be we are flexible, and that's the reason why we have so many feedback and experience, because we see all the pros and cons of every steps that Gabriele mentioned.
Yeah, sometimes we are just called for the selection, and then the implementation is done on their own. But usually then it comes back after 2 months.
Okay. So, but very critical point is something we missed in all my notes and my questions or conversation is actually change management, guys. This is something that is super it's not difficult, right? But it requires quite some attention, apart from documentation, correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the change management part, I think, is for sure a step that you need to embrace from the beginning of the project until the end of it. You need to be, so at the beginning, it's crucial that you involve all the necessary stakeholders, because so if you involve them, then people will start feeling as a part of the project, and like they have a decision, a word of saying on this. And then also until the end, when we said need with the training, because you need to indeed make sure that they are aware that this change is coming for good, is there to improve their daily work life, and not, although it is hard to let's say to not understand, but to start using, to learn how to work in a different way.
At the end, they have to switch, right? Donato mentioned something like old systems, right? Old security, old setup. This is something you still see it, right? People are using Excel for everything, right? And if you then have to change from your Excel, how heavy or difficult it is, towards a whatever platform or whatever solution, it is change, and it requires attention and a push towards using the new system. And if you look at the general approach from a payment factory, well, for me, I can't let it go, but there's a huge technical impact, right? There's a technical driver behind things. It's not only like the business value. For a small piece, it's there, right? Look at workflow. It should be one tool, should be one approach. You mentioned cash visibility as well. It brings added value, but people have to grow into seeing the added value and using this added value. Very nice. So what it costs? That's of course the question that remains. Like, what is it cost? But if you see, I think the duration is quite clear, right? So you should be able to set up a solution, a working solution, maybe phased in a year. Is that a correct assumption, or
on average,
total picture, right? From scratch, from 0 to hero.
On average, we did some implementation in 4 months. Why? Because the client was so knowledgeable. They exactly know what to do. They had the right resource. They already engaged the banks. The BIC was created, and everything was ready, and it was an easy one. While I have other clients, after 2 years and a half, we are still there. So it depends on the client, but on average, yes, you're right. It depends on the banks also. If we are talking about 4 or 5 banks, it's one thing. But if we have 20/30 banks in APAC or in LATAM, that's might be more complex.
Yeah, it's also something. I don't want to bring it, but we also have those success things, right? Like where you see, like, I don't know, by top of heart, it's like Siemens Gamesa is all the one that also pops up all the time. And that is actually, these are examples where you have differences in very smooth integration. And for me, also, sometimes it doesn't matter if it's 6 months or 8 months or 12 months. In many cases, it is dependent on resources, but correct me if I'm wrong. Resources are critical, right? You have your tech systems, very important, data flows, extracts, whatever, but resources are, the human factor is important, right?
Important, yes.
All right, very cool. I see that we're running already 40 minutes. I'm going to put an end to it. We can talk about it for days, I guess. So I want to open the floor towards questions, maybe from the audience. Jennifer, if you're still there, then you capture it, right?
Yeah, I'm still here. We had quite a few questions roll in. This first one comes in from David, and it came in at the beginning of your conversation around 9:08. So his question is a payment factory set up for payments on behalf of all entities in a group? Who would like to take that one?
So yeah, one of the main feature of the payment factory is all, of course, the use of the payment on behalf of and the collection on behalf of. So that's usually, I would say, in the last 10 implementation, we did 80% of the case. So it's and by doing the POBO, of course, you reduce the number of banks because that's the scope. you pay locally, you pay less fees because you pay domestic payments. You use domestic payments while maybe yesterday you used to pay cross border. So yeah, Bobo definitely it's one of the driver. I would say also, yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you so much. Next question came in from Glisten. Are most payment factories set up in US or Europe, or should more than one be established, i.e. North Am, Europe, Asia?
Gabriel, you go ahead. Or?
No, please go. Don't worry.
It depends on the structure you have in your company. But I never saw this setup, to be honest. So usually we have one center, treasury center, located either in Europe or in the US, and we are dealing with that structure.
Yeah, and maybe if I can jump in here as well, right, to support you guys. I think you're right. So it's really not that important. If you look at it from cutoff times, of course, that is important, right? If you look at payment factory, but also payment traffic. So the question, I guess, goes a bit beyond like where it is located. I think it's also related to cutoff times. If you look at cash visibility, this is also important, right? How does that fluctuate on bank feedback? But I would agree indeed with Donato, right? It doesn't really matter. Most of you go for a global platform and you handle it by it.
Great, thank you again. The next question comes in from Stefan. What kind of legal requirements should be adapted to a payment factory setup? Example, GTCs, single vendor contracts.
Yeah, so you have the internal, the access documents internally for your entities, and of course, if you it's more. Usually it's a collection on behalf of, or you have to put in the. We had cases where we have to put on the invoice of the client, of the customer, the end customer, the new bank number of the new legal entity. So that was something to be agreed with the legal department, and that's something taking into account, but from more on the legal side from the clients. We usually don't put our hands there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we've got 5 more questions. The next one is from Glisten again. What payment methods are used for payments, wires only, IAT, or both? How is FX hedging incorporated with TIS? Is the payment coming out of the bank account, say US dollar, or can be set up with bank accounts in different currencies?
Is it a TIS question, or is it a question for our colleagues from Deloitte? I can take it forward, right? If you look at from our side, from TIS side, the simple question is yes to all. It's not linked to wire or a SEPA payment. We have all kinds of payments in place with high value to SEPA or whatever you want to call it. That's not a problem. If you look at US dollar, and what was the question related to the currency again, Jennifer?
One moment. Sorry, I'm going back. Is the payment coming out of one bank, US dollar, or can be set up with bank accounts in different currencies?
Different currencies. No. Basically, you have to look at it like this, right? So if you look at a platform, whatever platform it is, by the way, it's not only TIS, but of course we are the best. But we can set it up with all bank accounts, all currencies, payment traffic, cross-border, doesn't matter. There's no limitation.
Okay.
But maybe this is one. If this person is interested in a bit more details, depending on the question, right? It can be discussed with our Deloitte colleagues, or if it's more like on the platform kind of stuff, I'm more than happy to take it forward, or we're more than happy to take it forward.
Okay, we can reach out after. All right.
Yeah, why not?
Next question comes in from Guillaume. Is it mandatory for such a project to be successful to concentrate all the incoming, outgoing payments under the same legal entity?
I would say yes, because that's the purpose. I mean, if you implement the payment factory, you should be able to route all your payments and all the legal entity through your main entity. So yes, I would say yes. Otherwise, it doesn't make really sense, because you keep going on a decentralized process, which is not the best practice, I would say.
Okay.
I think this question, and maybe also for you, Donato, I think this question, Treasury Department, right? So where you typically see that the owner of the bank accounts and the legal entities, or specifically the bank accounts, is the Treasury Center, right? Is this also how you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. The next question comes in from Ted. What are the most important features to consider when selecting a payment factory? And what are the main differences you see between the different suppliers on the offering for the features?
Well, I would say the most important features that you need to consider depends also on the requirements that you have. This brings back to what we said before with water. If you need a payment factory that enable you to have a signature flow, to have also different capabilities, then it depends also on your business. So on the other hand, then you asked also what are the most important capabilities, and the other part of the question was?
What are the main differences you see between the different suppliers on the offering for the features?
So I think that the most, from a business perspective, all the suppliers, I would say, are capable of doing basics for the payment factory or the payment factory like process. But I think that the key that can also drive a decision is also focused on SLAs and many times also on prices of the tool. Given the fact that you shortlist 3-4 suppliers that are able to provide you with the requirements that you need. So once you have the shortlist vendors, then the key decision would be driven also on that and on how the system also integrate with your current internal systems and banks. But please, Donato, if you want to add something, go ahead.
No, just about the feature, to be honest, they're all offering more or less the same high-level feature. Sometimes what you need, maybe you need a specific setup for the DD. We had clients with millions of DD. Not all vendors were able to support that. So you need to be careful there and to be sure and to ensure that the vendor will support you in case you need something additional. So we had cases where the product was nice, but you don't need to ask an MT101 to become an ISO XML. It was possible, but 2 weeks, change request, cost, etc. While the other, as its library, it was a mapping, in 1 day it was done. So the reason why, coming back to the beginning, the scope is really important, because if you add something, you need to be sure that the vendor will support you.
And I would agree with you guys, actually. Looking from the vendor side of things, I would agree. And if you look at our focus as well, so what is important for us is your initial step, right? And Gabrielle, I'm quoting you, is if you look at bank fee, for example, well, this is something that, for that reason, we offer. If you look at the platform that we have, it's kind of huge, right? So it contains everything you want. It has, I don't know how many, but thousands of bank connections. So that is a given for us, right? But where do we bring the added value? And I guess other vendors as well, is in those steps, right? Reducing risk, fraud, bank fee analyzer, bank connections, connectivity to ERPs. This should be or is the focus, right? To make sure that you don't have to wait weeks or months for a connection, but you can do it super fast.
Okay, great. Next question comes in from Annalise. Do you see any extra challenges in specific formats like Italian or Spanish tax payments? Typically, we need local bank accounts and local electronic banking tools to be able to execute them.
Yeah, so I guess you are referring to the F24, which is the payment of the tax in Italy, for which you need the e-banking. That's something we cannot get rid of. And we have local payments, local specificities that you cannot remove. So again, the famous check in France, that's something it's going step by step being removed. But indeed, in Italy, in Spain, maybe less. I remember the recibos, but yeah, we are trying to remove that. I have clients using DTAZV in Germany. They are going to the ISO XML in the near future because the DTAZV is decommissioning, so that's a fact. But yeah, you're right. In certain countries, you cannot standardize everything. That's for sure.
Okay, great. We had 2 more questions squeak in, so now we have 3 left. Excuse me. This one is from Atraf. Regarding multiple formats, how new Swift ISO 20022 can improve Payment Factory and streamline its implementation?
I think that's clear. You have one rich format, so the ISO XML, which is without any limitation. You can use plenty of fields, the structured reference, the unstructured, end-to-end ID, etc. And it's used everywhere across the world and the bank. So we are not pushing, but advising the clients to go for that. And you probably know that 2025 will be kind of deadline for financial institution to move from MT 101 to ISO. So we expect this being the same situation for corporates in 5/7 years. You know how it goes. So that's definitely the future. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. This next question comes in from R. Martin. Can you also include direct debits and payment factories? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. That was an easy one. And the last one comes in.
That's the last one. Yes.
Go. Moving on forward, the last one comes in from Michael. Given the fact that AI robotic automation is evolving fast, what are the arguments for centralizing payment processes when a group could use AI RA to operate its payments on the payment platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. To be honest, for me, it's a kind of black box for now. You need to maintain something. I mean, yeah, I don't know from the vendor side what's the approach, but for us, yeah, it's one option, but not really used every day.
I think that the answer is not straightforward, right? So from a vendor perspective, of course, we're also continuously exploring the AI options. But maybe one thing that we always consider as a vendor is as well that it's a black box, right? It's a machine that will decide certain items. I mentioned before risk or fraud or something like that. And yeah, the question that we always have is, do you want to let's take AI over, for example, your fraud prevention? Or do you want to still like have a suggestion coming from learnings, data, and asking the end user like, okay, we think it's safe, right? Or AI thinks it's safe. Do you want to like step in still, or do you want to blindly go for an AI solution that says like, hey, it's all good, let's move the payment out? Just as a general item, so we as a vendor exploring AI options continuously, but we're always on the safe side as well, right? It remains a machine, and we learn from our clients and continuously learn from our clients what the actual need is and what the value, just to make sure that everything is not going mental on certain items. But it's a valid question, right? I think that, well, we as a vendor are exploring all the options, and I think that most vendors are exploring the same, or also making sure that we do the necessary, because there is added value apart from maybe fully automating certain items. There is definitely added value in providing input, feedback, risk assessment, everything related to that one. There is definitely a win for also the clients.
Great. Thank you so much for the wonderful questions, everybody. And Wouter, Donato, and Gabrielle, thank you for the wonderful answers. Wouter, I hand the session back to you.
Well, I think it was very interesting, guys. So I want to thank you. I'm also very happy to see that the questions that were raised by our attendees, I have no clue, by the way, who, but it's super cool that they also added questions like more in detail. I would stay more high level. I think everybody has now a good introduction into, okay, what is it? Who should go for it? What is the approach? Very important. Time frame, also important, but it ties in. And then looking into solutions. I think most of the people on the call are very interested in, okay, what does it mean for us or for our entity? So with this, I would say to everybody that is listening in, well, of course, Gabrielle and Donato, you will probably get somehow their credentials or their email or their contact if it's related to an implementation. I jumped in here and there. That was not the intention, guys. Sorry for that. But if you have interest or you have a more technical or a question related to a vendor side of things, feel free to reach out to DIS as well. But with that being said, Donato, Gabriele, thanks. Very insightful.
Thanks to you, Wouter. Thank you.
Thank you.